welcome everybody. We're going to take advantage of a little downtime with coronavirus and put together a video that I have been trying to make for about 6 months or so and never got around to. Some of you may have seen my previous video where I did the T2 Pro versus the T2 Pro XT. If you haven't, I'll put that link in the description. This time we're going to be doing that Pro XT versus the Kuat NV 2.0. One advantage of my procrastination is that I've now been able to use this for quite a while and give a better sense of real-world use, not just features. So hope this helps you out in making your decision. We're going to begin by taking a look with these racks up in the upright position, obviously no bikes on them, and take a look at how they install into the vehicles, because it's actually a pretty big difference between the two. You'll see that the Thule's a little quicker to get in and out, but the NV 2.0 is a little bit more secure. So with the NV 2.0, it's basically a standard locking hitch pin. So the pin just slides through there, and then this little guy pops onto the back. Now, one of the things to take note of with this system is you don't need a key to put this on. So this little guy, you obviously need a key to take it off, but when you're putting it on, it just snaps into place. And that is super convenient. It allows you to do this much more quickly, but it does have one potential downside, and it's kind of a big one. You could accidentally be traveling and not have your key with you and not realize it, because it doesn't require a key to put it on. You could pull it out of your garage, snap it on there, and then get somewhere and find out that you don't have the key. And I've actually had this happen where we have customers come in and they realize they've traveled states away and they don't have the key that they thought they had. We've had people that had their bikes locked onto their rack and realized that they didn't have the key. So just something to keep in mind. What we usually do is we hang that pin locked with the key right through this little piece here. And that way, to get it down there, if you already have the lock in there, you need the key to be able to take it off to put it in. And so that way you're more likely to make sure you've got your key with you. So locks in back there, and then it tightens here. And pretty much with all of these systems, there's either a corner wedge or a ball. This one has a little ball inside there, up in the upper corner. And so as you tighten it, it helps to kind of wiggle the rack a little bit as you tighten, and then it will lock it in, and so that way you're not getting wiggle when you're going down the road. Okay, so then we're going to take a look at the Thule. This is the T2 Pro XT. It hooks up the same way as the past models did as well, and it's pretty different from the way the Kuat hooks up. So with this one, you have a retainer pin, so it's basically just a safety latch that goes in there in case it were to come out. And then you have a knob here, and that knob is tightening a wedge in the corner of the rack up into the receiver. And so just like before, we're tightening it up, we're making sure that it's firm in there, it can't move around, and then like I said, that pin is just there for safety. So the advantage to this one is I don't have to actually go all the way under there and put a pin through and get a lock on it, and when I want to get it out, the key is going right in the end here, so it's going right in the knob. And the way that works is when you turn the key to the lock position, the knob will then spin free, and so you cannot loosen it to loosen the wedge internally, which means theoretically you can't take the unit out of the vehicle. The one potential downside to that one, and it's not a huge one, but you can actually steal these things. And it has happened to some people where even when it's locked up, it's stolen. If you have a hitch pin through there like the NV 2.0 has, it's not going to be coming out of the vehicle. But with this system, people have been known to throw a chain around the unit and pull it with another vehicle. They can just pop that pin open and yank it, and it will literally rip it out of the vehicle even though that corner wedge is up in there. So just something to think about. There is the slight potential for theft there. Definitely quicker and a bit easier to pop this on and off on a regular basis. All that being said, the NV is still fairly easy to put on and off because some of the other units in the past and ones that are lower price, they don't just have a pin that slides through, they actually have a bolt that's threaded that has to go in, and you have to use a ratchet or a wrench and tighten it in there to get the unit to lock down. They don't have these corner locking balls or corner locking wedges that free it up. So both of these relatively easy to put on and off, but if you had to pick one that's easier, you'd have to give it to the Thule. It is a little... All right, so let's take a look at another thing that's going on here, and that is the distance from the locking pin to the back of the lowest point on the unit. And basically what we're looking at here is how likely are you to scrape this thing when you're dealing with steep angles. So with this guy, if we measure it, it's basically a foot to the skid plate here, a foot to the protector, 13 inches up to the knob, but you're not really gonna hit the knob, you're gonna hit the protector. So height-wise, you know, that's basically it's straight, so it's determined on the vehicle, but you're coming back about a foot on this guy. And then we're gonna take a look at the NV 2.0, which definitely sticks out farther. So with this one, we go to the hitch pin and we're about 18 inches until we get out here to the knob. And again, it's a straight shot, so it entirely depends on the height of your vehicle, but you're another 6 inches further out, so you are definitely more likely to scrape this thing. And unlike the Thule, it does not have a protector. Under here, you can actually see that we have definitely caught this thing before, and you can also see it on the knob here where it has hit things going in and out. Now that was on the Outback, which sits a little bit lower than the Tacoma, but it is something to consider. Okay, so now we're just gonna move through this stepwise. The next thing that you're gonna be doing with your rack, obviously, is lowering it when you're going to put a bike on it. And that is also kind of fundamentally different between these two. And it's actually one of the reasons that I had stayed away from this rack the year before and gone with the Thule. So I was very curious to see how I would like this system. And I gotta say, I actually haven't found it to be a problem at all. So with this one, you basically have a paddle here. It's like a lever, and there's a couple ways that you can drop it down. So one is you put your foot on there. And so you just grab the rack, you put your foot, and then swing it down. And the other is to use your hand, and you're generally not gonna wanna do that from this position. But it is useful once you're in this position and you want to lower it down even more, then you're just using your hand right there. It's like this. So in comparison, the Thule has the handle up here at the top, and so that makes bringing it down quite easy. You're basically never reaching inside the rack. So even when there's bikes on there, you're generally gonna reach out here and be underneath it, and then it just sits at the bottom, and when you bring it up, then it just locks into place. Obviously you can hear it. It's very easy to know that it's in place. It's not gonna come loose from there. And then handle to bring it up. Now one thing they did change with the T2 Pro XT is because they separated these a little bit more, now this lever arm gets in the way of the handle, so it's harder to reach that way. So you kind of have to just get used to pulling it from the backside, which is a little awkward when it's up top. It's totally fine when it's down below, and something that you get used to. Okay, one other thing that I want to show and talk about is the general stability of these on the road. So both of them are 2-inch. Obviously, if you have 1.25 inch, that's going to be a little bit less stable, just from the smaller square tube diameter. It'll wiggle a little bit more, but one of the things that Thule did is they created this skeletonized box, and that definitely contributes to the stability of this unit. If we compare that to the NV, basically it's just the straight up 2-inch coming out, and then looking at this guy right here. So not quite the same. However, I will say it's been super stable. So different ways of going about it, but I would say they both are really stable going down the road. One other thing kind of worth talking about before we throw bikes on here is just the finish on these. And in this case, the finish award definitely has to go to the Kuat. If we're looking at the Thule here, it's kind of just a rough kind of black paint on aluminum, and when we're looking at the Kuat, it's actually basically like a car finish. It's even metallic, if you can kind of see that, with a super high gloss finish over the top. Apologize for the racks being dirty. They were put away this way and have not been used for a little while. Generally like to keep my things clean. One other thing that I failed to mention regarding the handles is that there's a pretty obvious reason that Thule does not have a handle, at least on this unit, and that is that there's a bike work stand built into this unit. And so it just sits there normally, but if you loosen this, then that draws up and swings out, and then this guy opens up, and loosen this and set it however you want it here for attaching to your bike. And so you're losing your handle, but at least in the case of this unit, you are gaining something too, and that ratchets in, which is pretty nice, and then just tightens up to finish the job. So if you're wanting to do any work on your bike, setting high or low limits, or even just putting some chain lube on there, it's a pretty easy way to do it without having to deal with it being in the rack and you're spinning your back pedaling and, you know, potentially running your pedals into another bike on the rack. Okay, so now we're going to show both racks with just a single bike on each one, just kind of show some of the features here. So taking a look at the Kuat NV 2.0 first, a couple nice features. I didn't even notice these at first, and they were pointed out to me by the rep when he came in. There's a rubber piece that's on the back of the strap, is rubberized, which is pretty nice, especially when you're dealing with carbon wheels, for just preventing rub on there. And I'll show you the way the Thule is here in a second, but it has left marks on my carbon wheels on my mountain bike. Another thing is the way the arms work. So in both units it's just a standard swinging arm, but the way that they telescope is different on these two units. So in this case it's the entire arm that is sliding out, and you just have a knob right here that you push. They're also different in where they attach. So this one, it's pretty thick, and it's a material that, according to the rep, they made it so that it's soft enough that if it's up against something, like if it's rubbing on a brake line, it will actually rub a little bit and kind of rub away so that this gets worn away, not the bike. So overall though, it's been really good at holding the tires, and it definitely takes the win over the Thule as far as stability goes. It holds the bikes much better, in my opinion. It's less likely to move in place on the tire. Wherever you leave it is where it's been sticking. What I want to point out here is that because you have that nice automotive quality finish on this vehicle, they also put basically kind of like an auto wrap. So it's a thin piece of plastic of some kind, a little cover, and that goes where your wheel sits, so it just helps protect the unit. And then the way these work for adjusting to different bikes is that whole piece just slides, and so going to a shorter wheelbase like this road bike, you just move it in really easy. You can see the track here, it can slide all the way in as short as you want to go. And the way these work is they just slide in, and then you pull them from the bottom to get them relatively snug. You're just trying to keep the tire from jumping off, and that's a little different than the Thule as well. Okay, so now we're going to compare some of those same features on the Thule. So in this case we also have an arm, but there's a knob right here that you're going to push, and that slides this piece on that arm. And then it is ratcheting. It has teeth on the backside here that are used to hold it down. You can see that the upper unit is much thinner than on the other one, and it has a little bit of play in it as well. I'm going to show you how the strap attaches on the Thule. With this one, it's a ratchet, and so you push it down to release it. It has a rubber cover here instead of a rubber lining on the inside. But it's kind of got lines built into it, and if you're not careful with this, it can leave impressions in a carbon wheel that'll be the same layout as that. So you just push it down, this slides in place for where you need it, and then it ratchets down to put some tension on it. With this one, the whole unit slides to set up for wheelbase, and the strap itself can be adjusted using the same strap for a fat bike tire. This rack fits up to a 5-inch tire, where the NV 2.0 fits up to a 4.8. And the way that strap works is once you release it, it pulls out from right here, and then that starts on the back side to give you a longer strap to reach around. So you just basically feed it into a spot farther along. With the NV 2.0, I believe it has an additional strap that attaches on to the first one. So while we're on that subject, another thing is just kind of comparing the units as far as spec goes. So with regard to wheelbase, the NV is a 48-inch maximum, and the T2 is a 50.5-inch wheelbase. So that's 1,283 millimeters on the Thule, and 1219, which is actually the exact wheelbase of my Ibis HD4. Now, I could tell when having that bike on there that you could go a little bit longer. It would just sort of hang a little bit further on the back. But regardless, the Thule definitely wins when it comes to overall wheelbase. As far as capacity for weight, they can both take 60 pounds and a wheel size that is 20 to 29 inches, and that's 60 pounds each. So each tray can hold 60 pounds. Same wheel size is 20 to 29, and the width of the wheel is 5 inches on the Thule versus 4.8 on the NV 2.0. Both racks weigh 52 pounds, and both are pretty similar in price. I think the new Thules are now selling for like $620, and I think the NV 2.0 is still selling for around $650, so not a huge difference in price on the two. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys a little bit about adjustability on the two and how to prevent bikes from hitting each other, because they go about it in different ways. So with the NV 2.0, you have a system where there's an Allen in here, and when you loosen that, it allows both wheel trays, front wheel trays, to go down, and then they can lock in lower, or they can go up, and you can see it here. So the middle position, everything lines up. The upper position would look like that. You just tighten it and it stays there, and the lower position would look like this. It has bolts underneath here, and the actual trays can slide on the main unit. And so each one of these on the Pro XT can slide 2 inches in each direction. And so that allows you to basically get your bike separated. Because I wanted to show you guys the interference here. And so right now, both of the wheel trays are in the normal middle position, and as you can see, there's some definite contact between the handlebars and the seat on that one. And so then what we're going to do is drop this down. You can see we've adjusted the front tray now, and it's in the low position, and so that lets the bike drop forward a little bit, and it actually makes a significant difference. When I first kind of saw that that was their method, I didn't think it was going to do very much, but now you can see up here you've got nice separation between the two. And of course you could also adjust the front bike as well, so that bike could drop down, which would bring it further away, or it could probably drop it up as well, which would probably bring the handlebars up to here. So it is a system that seems to work. Obviously, because of the way they set these up with the centerpiece and the arms coming out, there's no ability to slide them back and forth, but that does seem to work. Another thing we'll talk about while we've got the road bike up here is one downside to tray racks generally, and that is that if you have a bike with a front rack or front fenders, it prevents you from putting this arm as close to the fork as it should be. Ideally, you set the arm right near the fork but not touching it, and that'll give you the most stability going down the road. Obviously, if you have a fender, you need to be in front of it, and if you have a rack, that's going to prevent it from moving in there. So not quite as stable, but I have driven with this bike on tray racks and I've never had a problem with it, but that's just something to know going into it. While we're on that subject, a general advantage to a tray rack versus a hitch rack where it's a hanging bike with the two arms that come up is if you have a step-through bike where the top tube dips down. On those, you need to put in a false top tube to get it to hang straight. With a tray rack, that's completely out the door. You don't have to worry about it. And you're also much less likely to get contact between bikes with the tray style racks. And you also aren't touching the frame anywhere on these, where you're obviously touching the frame if it's hanging. So we've got both of them off the vehicles, and I want to show everybody real quickly a couple things. First of all, if you just look at them, you can see that the profile on the Thule is significantly larger than the Kuat. So even though they're both the same weight, this is a much bigger one to carry around. And it's pretty noticeable. Like when you're carrying this, it feels pretty compact. You can keep it close to your body. It's relatively easy to do. Whereas carrying this around, it's a little more cumbersome. It's just larger and a little more to handle. The other thing is they're different in their stability on the ground. So the Kuat definitely wins here. When you're setting it on the ground, it doesn't have a lot of, it doesn't tip very far to the side, but more importantly, it doesn't want to fall back at all. Like it's actually hard to lean it that way. And that's the opposite of the Thule, and I think that's because of that short pin giving you a little bit better clearance off the rear. The downside to that is when you set it down, it's really close in its balance point to just tipping backwards. And even if you put it back on the lower part, then that's also very close to its tipping point. And so you have to be more careful with this when it's sitting, say in your garage. We normally sit them on the sides like this, and then we have a little bungee cord that runs from the wall to hook around this just to prevent it, because you can see how easily that could tip over. And that's not the case at all here. One other cool thing, Kuat just came out with, I think it's called a rack dock, and it's a little, I think it's an aluminum box that has the receiver opening in it, and you mount that on a stud on your wall, and then this entire rack just slides into there and stores upright against the wall, basically simulating the back of the vehicle. So that's pretty nice. Then the last thing I want to show you is the way these wedge into the vehicle. It has the little ball there, and you'll be able to see as I spin the back here that that's getting pushed up and out, and so that's wedging it into the vehicle. And then the Thule is somewhat similar. It basically has a little wedge, and that's going to ride as I tighten it. I'm pulling it towards me, and that's going to pull that up that ramp, which is widening it out, pinching it into the vehicle. And so in both cases, you're preventing the bike rack from wiggling and rattling, so you don't hear any rattle. But in this case, you got to remember that this one is also serving as a security device. So that is what's keeping the thing from being pulled out of the vehicle. Another thing that I just realized I forgot to talk about is the way that you can lock bikes to these units in addition to locking the unit to the vehicle. And it's totally different on the two. On the Thule, it's up on the arm here, and this whole piece pops off. They made it nice this year, or on the Pro XT, where it actually kind of sits in there and doesn't flop around like the old one did. But this whole unit comes out. This is separate from it, and so then you can wrap this around the bike, and it comes back in to here, and then you turn it, and that locks it into place. The Kuat, the whole thing, it's magnetic. It's held in place here by a magnet, and then you pop it out. Again, it's separate from the cable, but it appears to be a thicker cable. Let's show them side by side here. So definitely looks to be a thicker cable, nicer quality, and then it's segmented so that the whole thing can fit back inside there. So that pulls out, and it's also definitely longer. So much more impressive on the lock here. It's long enough that you can usually fit it around the front tire of the bike on one side and the rear of the other side through the frame and get that locked up. So I hope that helps everybody out. I tried to kind of cover all the bases and all the things that came up as I've been using these. Like I said, each one got about a year of use. I was on the fence about the Kuat when we picked it up. But in the end, I would say that that's definitely the way that I would go again. It's been a really nice one to use. It's got really good fit and finish, high quality, no wiggle. But I feel like you kind of can't go wrong with either one of these. They work super well, and I always advocate that people go with a tray rack if they're willing to spend the money, because it's super convenient for being able to pop bikes on and off of there. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you've got any thoughts, questions, or concerns, drop them in the comments, and thanks for watching.